The desert sky burned orange as the sun began to sink behind the rugged hills of Dust Creek, Texas. The air shimmered with heat, and the smell of dry grass mixed with the faint sweetness of blooming sage. On the edge of that small forgotten town, a man rode slowly toward the horizon, a man everyone knew, yet few really understood. His name was Clint Hargrove, the cowboy who had once been a hero, now a shadow of himself. Clint had spent his entire life behind a saddle, chasing storms in silence. He'd once worked for the sheriff's office, known for his iron will and quick draw, but that was before his anger ruined everything. 3 years ago, during a drunken brawl in a saloon, he'd crossed a line, hitting a man who never got up again. Though the law had called it an accident, Clint called it his curse. He left town the next morning and hadn't looked back since. But now, he was returning. Dust Creek hadn't changed much, the same wooden porches, the same leaning fences, the same whisper of wine through the open plains. People stared when he rode by, some nodded politely, most just looked away. The cowboy who once stood for justice was now a name spoken in half-breaths. That's him, the one who lost his soul. That night, Clint stopped at an old tavern, the Silver Spur, a dimly lit bar that reeked of whiskey and loneliness. He ordered a drink and sat quietly in the corner. The room buzzed with laughter and music, but Clint's world was a silent storm inside. He didn't come back for redemption, he didn't even know why he came back at all. Maybe to see if the town still hated him. Maybe because something inside him couldn't stand the silence anymore. Then the door swung open. A girl stepped in, not more than 20, her clothes dusty, her face tired but bright with determination. She had a small guitar slung over her shoulder and a notebook pressed to her chest. Her name, as Clint would soon learn, was Lila Grace. Lila wasn't from Dust Creek. She'd come all the way from Oklahoma chasing a dream, to sing. She had a soft voice that carried the kind of hope people forget they need. She asked the bartender if she could play a song to earn her supper, and though he grumbled at first, her smile disarmed him. Within minutes, the tavern quieted as her fingers touched the strings. Her song was simple, but the words felt like sunlight on old wounds. There's a line we all cross when the night gets long, between what's right and what feels wrong. But if love still breathes where the pain once lied, then maybe the heart ain't truly died. Clint's hand froze on his glass. Every word hit him like a mirror reflecting everything he'd buried. When she finished, the crowd clapped softly, but Clint couldn't move. He just sat there, the cowboy who'd forgotten what feeling sounded like. Later that night, as most folks left and the music faded, Lila sat at the counter with a cup of coffee. Clint, hesitating but drawn, walked over. "You got away with words," he said, his voice rough as gravel. She looked up, her eyes the color of rain. "Thank you, sir. I write what I see, and what I hope for." He nodded slowly. "Hope's a rare thing around here." Lila tilted her head. "Then maybe that's why I came." She told him she'd been traveling for weeks, singing at small bars, hoping to make it to Austin for a talent show. But her car had broken down outside town, and she was out of money. Clint offered to help fix it, not out of charity, but because something about her felt like a second chance at being human. Over the next few days, Clint and Lila crossed paths often. He found himself fixing her car during the day and listening to her songs at night. She didn't know his past, not yet. To her, he was just a quiet cowboy with sad eyes and rough hands who always showed up when the world got hard. One evening, while they sat under the stars near the old riverbed, Lila said softly, "You ever wish you could go back and fix something?" Clint stared at the stars, his jaw tight. "Every damn day." She smiled gently. "Then maybe you already started. Sometimes, helping someone else is the first step to fixing yourself." He didn't answer, but her words lingered like the echo of a promise. A week later, Dust Creek was hit by a violent storm. The rain poured for hours, flooding roads and breaking fences. The Silver Spur's roof leaked, and the power went out. In the chaos, word spread, a little girl from town, Maggie, had gone missing. She was only 7, last seen playing near the river before the storm hit. The sheriff's men searched through the night, but the river was swelling fast. Clint heard about it while helping Lila pack up her things. Without a second thought, he grabbed his hat, mounted his horse, and rode into the storm. Lila shouted after him, "Clint! It's dangerous out there." But he didn't stop. Maybe this was his moment, not for forgiveness, but for purpose. The rain stung his face, the wind howled, and the river roared like a beast. Lightning flashed, revealing broken branches and muddy water. Then he saw it, a small figure clinging to a tree branch, her tiny hands slipping. "Maggie! Hold on!" Clint shouted, dismounting and wading into the torrent. The current was strong, pulling at his legs like claws, but he pushed through, step by step. The girl's eyes were wide with terror. "Don't let go," he yelled, reaching out just as her grip failed. For a heartbeat, time froze, then he caught her. The current dragged them both downstream, but Clint held her above the water, gasping, pushing toward the shore. His strength was fading fast, his boots sinking into the mud. Just when it seemed they'd both go under, a rope whipped across the water, Lila's voice screaming through the rain. "Grab it!" She had followed him on foot, barefoot, soaked to the bone. Together, they pulled with every ounce of will until Clint and the child reached solid ground. He collapsed, coughing, clutching Maggie to his chest. Lila fell beside him, sobbing. "You did it, you saved her." Clint looked at her through the rain, his chest heaving. For the first time in years, his eyes softened. "No," he whispered, "we did." The next morning, the town gathered at the sheriff's office. Maggie was safe. Her mother cried as she hugged Clint, thanking him over and over. The sheriff, an old friend who once arrested him, took off his hat and said quietly, "Looks like you finally crossed the right line, Clint." That night, the Silver Spur was alive again, laughter, music, and gratitude filled the air. Lila sang a new song, written just for him. Some men fall, some men rise. Some find light in another's eyes. When the cowboy crossed that line tonight, he found his heart in the fading light. As her voice carried through the bar, Clint felt something shift deep inside him, a peace he hadn't known in years. He looked at her and smiled faintly. Maybe redemption wasn't a thing you asked for. Maybe it was something you earned, one act of courage, one selfless choice, one unbelievable night at a time. And that was the night Clint Hargrove, the cowboy who once lost everything, found the line worth crossing. The next few days in Dust Creek felt different, like the wind had carried something new across the plains. People nodded to Clint again, not out of fear or pity, but out of quiet respect. Word of his courage spread fast. The man once whispered about as a disgrace had now saved a child's life. But Clint didn't feel like a hero. He felt human again. Lila stayed in town a little longer than planned. Her car was finally fixed, but every morning she still came by Clint's small stable, where he worked on his horses in the soft golden light. She'd bring him coffee and sit on a bale of hay, humming songs while he cleaned the saddles. It became their routine, unspoken but understood. One morning, she asked softly, "Clint, what will you do now?" He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. "Guess I'll keep doing what I know. Fixing fences, mending things." She smiled faintly. "You ever think maybe you're not just meant to fix fences, but hearts too?" He chuckled, but the sound was gentle this time. "That's a mighty tall order for a cowboy who's been broken himself." Lila looked at him with eyes that saw more than words could tell. Sometimes the broken ones understand how to heal others best. Her words stayed with him for the rest of the day. That evening, as the sunset spilled fire across the hills, Clint walked to the edge of town. He stopped by a small wooden cross that stood near the riverbank, the place where his life had changed years ago. The grave was for Earl Jennings, the man who died in that saloon fight. Clint had come here every year on that same date, leaving a simple token of guilt, a flower, a coin, or a prayer. But this time was different. This time, he brought forgiveness. He knelt, hat in hand. "Earl," he said quietly, "I don't expect you to hear me, but I've carried the weight of that night for too long. I can't change what happened. But I can live better, for both of us." The wind stirred, carrying the sound of water and rustling leaves. Clint closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't feel haunted. He felt released. When he turned to leave, Lila was standing behind him. She had followed silently, her hands folded around her guitar. "You never told me," she said softly. "That was the man?" Clint nodded, not ashamed anymore. "Yeah. My anger cost a man his life. I left town so no one else would have to look at me and remember." She stepped closer. "And now you've come back, not to erase it, but to make peace." He looked at her, something raw and real flickering in his eyes. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she said. "But it's worth it." The following week, Dust Creek prepared for its annual Founders Fair, a small-town festival filled with music, food, and laughter. For the first time in years, Clint joined the crowd instead of avoiding it. Lila had been invited to sing on stage, and the townsfolk were buzzing with excitement. She insisted Clint sit in the front row. When she stepped on stage, under the soft glow of string lights, her voice carried through the night like a prayer. "Sometimes the storm don't break you down. It washes the pain that's been hanging around. Sometimes one heart can light the way. For someone who forgot how to stay." As she sang, Clint's eyes welled up. Around him, the people of Dust Creek clapped, swayed, and even smiled at him, the man who had once disappeared into the desert. The sheriff, standing near the back, tipped his hat. Clint nodded in return. When the show ended, Lila came down from the stage and found Clint waiting by the old oak tree. The night was cool, the stars scattered across the endless Texas sky. "You did good," he said softly. She grinned. "You too. I saw you smiling. Didn't think cowboys knew how." He laughed quietly. "Guess I'm learning again." They stood in silence for a while, the sounds of the fair fading behind them. Finally, Lila looked up and said, "I leave for Austin tomorrow. The contest's in 2 days." He nodded. "You'll win." "I don't know about that," she said, "but I'll sing. And I'll remember this place. And you." Something in her tone made his chest tighten. "You don't have to go, you know. Dust Creek could use more music." Lila smiled sadly. "And you could use someone who stays. But sometimes, Clint, we meet people not to hold them, but to show them they can live again." He looked away, his jaw tightening to hide the ache in his heart. "And what about you?" "I needed to believe there were still good men in the world," she said. "Now I do." The next morning, Lila packed her old guitar and suitcase. Clint helped her load the car, his hands moving slower than usual, like he was trying to delay time itself. When she got behind the wheel, he leaned on the door, hat in hand. "If you ever need a stage to come back to," he said softly, "Dust Creek's got one waiting." She smiled through watery eyes. "And if you ever forget how far you've come, look at the river. It remembers who you saved." Then she drove off down the dusty road, her car disappearing into the golden morning. Clint stood there long after the dust settled, feeling both empty and full at once. Months passed. Dust Creek returned to its quiet rhythm, cattle moving across open fields, the church bell echoing on Sundays, the silver spur glowing every Friday night. Clint had changed. He started helping at the local orphanage, fixing fences and teaching the kids how to ride. People said he smiled more now, still the same rugged cowboy, but with light in his eyes instead of shadows. And every night, he'd sit on his porch and watch the stars, wondering where Lila's road had taken her. Then one evening, as he was feeding his horse, he heard a sound, faint at first, then clearer. A voice. Singing. The melody was familiar, like a ghost made of light. He stepped outside. A car was parked by the fence, dust swirling around it. And there she was, Lila Grace, standing with her guitar, grinning. "You didn't think I'd forget Dust Creek, did you?" Clint froze for a moment, then laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that shook the quiet air. "Well, I'll be damned. You came back." She shrugged playfully. "Won the contest. Got a record deal offer. But every song I sang, I thought about this place, about you, about that night by the river. I figured maybe my music started here, so I'd better finish what I began." He took a step closer, eyes soft. "And what was that?" She smiled. "Showing you that second chances aren't just for stories." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them hummed with the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Then Clint reached for her hand, rough and warm, and said quietly, "Guess I crossed the line again." Lila laughed. "Yeah, but this time, it's the right one." That night, under the same stars that once watched him drown in guilt, Clint Hargrove danced for the first time in years, with the girl who'd walked into his darkness carrying a song of light. The townsfolk gathered, smiling as music drifted through the air. The sheriff clapped him on the back. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. And above it all, Lila's voice rose, steady, pure, and full of grace. One line crossed, one life changed. Two hearts found where hope remained. When the cowboy crossed the line that night, he found his soul in the morning light. As the song faded, Clint looked around, at the people who had once turned their backs, now standing beside him. He felt something deep and unshakable take root in his heart. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a journey, and he was finally walking it, step by step, toward the sunrise. Lila rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "Told you hope's a rare thing." He smiled, his voice soft and certain. "Maybe. But it's the only thing worth fighting for." And there, beneath the endless Texas sky, a broken cowboy and a dreamer girl stood together, proof that even when life pushes you past every line, love, kindness, and forgiveness can draw you back home again.